Great. All right, everyone. Thank you for being here. Again, my name is Destiny Lane. I am a recruiter. I have 5 years of experience working with tech startups that are quite small. I have exclusively recruited for seed stage, Series A and Series B companies that have anywhere between 1 employee to 300. So that is the scale of organizations that I come to this conversation with that perspective. And I'm just making sure I keep the QA thing over here just in case anything pops up. Cool. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. So I do want to remind people of that just because there's so many different aspects and just different parts of the industry when it comes to recruiting. And my experience is 5 years specifically working in tech. And when I say that, it is all across the board. I did start in sales roles, recruiting for sales development reps. And I transitioned into, and we'll talk about that when I share just kind of that income and how it grew in that first year. But I did start with more simpler roles for me to understand that were closer to the skill sets that I already had. And then as I started to understand the fundamentals and grasp everything, that's when I started to take on more challenging projects. So that being said, I also, let's just get into it. So the strategy that I'm going to share with you, I'm calling the lean recruiter, and I like to call it the lean recruiter because typically I was either a team of one, a team of half of one, a team of two, a team of three. I never worked in these massive recruiting organizations. So the strategies that I share, might be something that you may not have heard of, or I'm just coming from it with a different eye. And I want you to understand that my perspective is this. I like to get as much as I can get done with as little as possible. And that does not mean overworking your recruiters or yourself, but I really enjoy technology. So I like to look at all the tools and see how I can get the most out of the tools I'm already using. Am I over tooling? Am I under tooling? And then after those things are streamlined, I want to hire the right people because I don't want to hire the wrong people. When you hire the wrong people, you're not able to do things effectively. And I wouldn't want to hire, the wrong people for my recruiting team because that's really going to affect the growth of the entire organization, right? So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. And I'd also just rather see that money go into the pockets of the recruiters, right? So if I can just, have a smaller team and pay them well, like why not? That's my preference. And if someone on my team wants to automate a process and make things more efficient and, reduce the amount of manual work they're doing, like I don't care. I think that's great. And I think that is the kind of behavior you should encourage in your organization because that just makes organizations more profitable. And I also think that that's an interesting way to keep your employees engaged in their work or even yourself engaged in your work, which is exactly what I did in that first year as a recruiter. Obviously, I stayed in the industry. My income gratefully has only gone up from there. But I do just want to share that because that's just my philosophy that I'm coming from. I didn't write that down on this slide, but just wanted to share that. And then also before we get into it, I do just want to call out, I did not start as an entry-level employee and make $125,000 my first year. I was an entry-level recruiter in my first year working as a recruiter, but I did have a career before that, right? And some of the experiences and the roles and the tools that I was introduced in my career beforehand allowed me to then go into this new role, into this new industry and excel. So I just want to call that out because I don't want to be like, yeah, I came out of college and this and that. I also didn't graduate from college. I was studying fashion design. I transitioned into a graphic design program and I failed out. So when I failed out, I was introduced to the tech industry by one of my friends. She had a sales job. She also did not have a college degree. So that opened my mind to this new industry. And that's how I started in customer support for a B2C company. It was like you download this app and you get a cleaner to come to your home. And that was like revolutionary at the time. You couldn't do that at the time. You'd have to call different services and stuff like that and have a cleaner come to your home. And I would be the person you'd call in if you, wanted to sign up for a cleaning, complain about a cleaning, rebook the same cleaner because they did a great job, just different things of that nature. Or if, you had questions, whatever it was. From there, I did transition into B2B SaaS sales. So what that means is I was selling a piece of software that helped onboard and train employees, right? So in that role, I started to understand cold outreach a bit more. I was cold calling a ton, like 200 people a day. I don't cold call as a recruiter. I don't text people as a recruiter. It's just not my preference. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I just don't want people doing it to me. So I'm not doing it to other people. Just send me an email. Send me an email, So in that role, I got really good at email. From there, I had taken an interest in marketing. So I worked as a marketer for several years in, just different B2C health companies targeting, just people with these health products, protein powders, whatever it was. And then I found myself recruiting for B2B SaaS companies. Specifically, I started in health technology, but I have also recruited sales, go-to-market, technical roles like software engineering, finance roles in the crypto space, HR tech, for FANG companies. I've hired over 150 people. And I now specialize in ATS implementation, process development, and sourcing. And if you are new to recruiting, when I say ATS, that stands for applicant tracking software. And that is the worlds that you just exist in 100% of the time as a recruiter. It's where you manage all your candidates. If you've ever applied for a job, your profile is in an ATS and they move you forward, and it helps us just know what's going on at the company. It's where we collect your feedback and things of that nature. So let's get into what everyone really came here for. It's the money. And hey, I'm all for it. So I'm going to take another sip of water, and then we're going to go into exactly how I did this. And I want to provide you a framework so that you can figure out whether you are an existing recruiter, maybe some skills that you can go ahead and develop, or this year, hey, use this as your action plan for this year and say anything on this list that you're not, that you are currently missing in your skill set, or something that you want to go dive deeper into, go do it and use this and set this up and go to your manager, turn this into your action plan, and make sure that you get into a position to get promoted, or hey, use this framework to study and develop these skills and go get a job somewhere else that's going to pay you more because you're possibly underpaid. That's the thing about recruiting. Recruiting is a thankless job. I love it, but sometimes it's definitely a space that can be understaffed, and it's something that can be underappreciated until you really need it. So taking a sip of water, and then let's get into it. All right, let's see how I'm doing on time. All right, I think we're doing well. And then I'll go month by month. So here we go. This shows the breakdown of my income my first year as a recruiter. I want to call out a few things before we dive in. This first month, January, I did start recruiting halfway through the month. So that's really why that one started lower. So there was nothing crazy that I had done in January to go from here to here. So I just want to call that one out for a little perspective. And then it's interesting because I was seeing how like there were almost like these quarterly shifts that occur, right? Quarter one, I begin and my income is in this area. Quarter two, I hover in this range as I continue to develop my skills, my process, my craft. Area three, or quarter three, I hit 10K and surpass 10K and stay above 10K a month when it comes to my recruiting income. And quarter four, I shoot up to $15,000 a month in my first year recruiting. It was so crazy. I like pulled this from my bank statement and I was just like, this is so crazy. When I just sit down and I look at it and I see those trends, and it's just so like, it even blows my own mind that I did that in my first year as a recruiter. And those are major milestones. Like, I can't believe that. And it's just really, really exciting. And I just wanted to share that because I hope the same for you. Because recruiting, despite all the stuff going on right now, I still think that, recruiting's hot. It's a great industry to be in. Unfortunately, these mass layoffs, it is an unfortunate name of the game with some of these companies. And I don't recruit for those types of companies, right? Like, let's go back. I had mentioned I'm working for these smaller companies. Typically now, especially in now that I'm 5 years into the game, I definitely advise the clients that I work with, if I see something weird in their hiring plan, and I think that they're hiring too many people, I definitely say that. Unfortunately, the companies that I've worked with have not had to lay off staff, right? So it's still a super hot industry. I would say if you are a recruiter and you are looking for a job, I would say to avoid the sexy name brand companies and think about the industries that people are maybe not talking about. And also like think about climate tech, like think about just like not B2B tooling, to be honest, because there's so many other companies and jobs out there. And what ends up happening here is after my first year, a really interesting thing happens, because in my second year as a recruiter, midway through the year or in that first quarter, COVID happens. And what I find is that in my second year as a recruiter, my income, definitely stops for a few months, and it's definitely scary. I was able to collect unemployment, so I'm not even going to lie about that. But what ends up happening is when I start recruiting again, by the end of that year, I am making, again, just like really, really incredible money. And, for a year that felt so scary, I was able to more than make up for the months that I theoretically would not have been earning if I was not able to collect unemployment. So I just want to shout that out, because what will happen is there will be these waves, and you can ride one of these waves similar to I did, where you get opportunity, you develop skills, you develop expertise, credibility, goodwill with the people that you work with, and you'll be able to ride one of these waves. There was a shortage of us. Our income was able to go up. It was a good time. So let's get into it. So in January, it just so happens that my first year recruiting literally did start in January. So it gives us a clean calendar year to look at. So let's talk about some of the things that I did. And let me look at that time again and take a quick sip of water. Also, if any questions come up, feel free to ask. So January, obviously I land my first recruiting opportunity. People oftentimes ask me how networking, how online, how Bumble Biz, what the fuck? I know, okay? So through Bumble Biz, I find this client, I find this CEO, I start talking to the CEO, I get on a call with this CEO, and all of a sudden I'm interviewing with their people ops people, meeting their team, and I become a recruiter. Okay. And the interesting thing about that is I told you I was working as a marketer beforehand, right? And I end up back in tech, but not in marketing. I end up in recruiting. So that's why I just want to shout out anyone here that is considering a new industry. Shout out to you, because I was not even considering something new. I really wasn't. And I'm really grateful that this opportunity came my way, because this to me has been the most fulfilling work that I've done. I did enjoy marketing. I just I didn't enjoy marketing for other people, I'll be honest. But I do like marketing and apps and social media and just trends and how people communicate, but I just didn't want to do that for a living. So let's see. The second thing that I did here was I started understanding the current hiring landscape at the organization I was working at and how to build trust. So what I mean here is, I don't know about you guys, but I think we've all had, encounters, or, HR has a bad rep. Let's just say it. HR is sneaky. HR is a sneaky bitch that no one likes. And recruiting gets lumped into her. Okay. And sometimes recruiting is assigned to someone who wants to be in an HR role. And HR and recruiting are two different things. To give you a little perspective, if you're not in the industry, the difference here is recruiting gets the people into the job. And after you sign the job offer, HR deals with you. They get you paid, they get you benefits, they deal with the post-hire thing, right? And those are really just two different things. And oftentimes take two just different types of skills and people. And again, if you sign up for this, you don't want that. So I had to understand what was going on here. And what was going on at this organization was that unfortunately the company had lost trust in their hiring function. No one had trust. And the reason why they lost trust is because the hiring was going horrifically. It, according to the people, according to retention, according to Glassdoor reviews, this was not a good place to work. Now, that was interesting to me, because when I came in and when I interviewed with these people and I, started to get to know the company better, it actually was a really great place to work, and as someone who had seen so many different the insides of so many different companies, this was actually a really, really good place to work. They had a really healthy, just leadership. You had founders who were parents. You didn't have a ton of happy hours. I'm sorry if I sound lame, but like this is just like at a certain point, I felt like that culture just got horrific. And, this was a place that not only had things that I, thought were really good values and strong selling points as a recruiter trying to sell an organization, but at the same time, they also had a lot of diversity in many different ways. We had people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, which is not the case at all startups, okay? You had people of color, you had women in leadership, you had women in the C-suite, you actually had people be nurtured throughout their career. I saw several women enter, almost pretty much begin their career at that company and grow into VPs, right? Several people. So there was a beautiful story here to be told. And yet the people had lost trust in the organization, right? And I found out why. Again, not only was recruiting just not done in an effective way, but also their ATS actually was broken. I'll get to that one next. Let me actually finish these next points before I go into their ATS being broken, because that's like a different rant. So in that first month, I was really focusing on relationship building, instead of just, claiming that I had all the solutions, because I definitely didn't. I definitely knew how to find the kinds of people that they were looking for. I started my career in sales development. I had done some career coaching throughout my entire career, because naturally people came to me online and they were like, hey, I know you got a job at a startup, you live in Manhattan, you don't have a college degree, I'm stuck, help me, right? So that was like my natural side hustle that came up, and I didn't realize you could even just be a recruiter, right? So for me to transition into recruiting now, looking back on it, all makes sense. But instead of just saying I have all the answers, because I didn't always, right? I focused on building relationships and building trust and figuring out like what we needed to do, like what the company's employees were going to need to see from us to trust us, because we were never going to be able to get the right people hired or push any initiative forward as a recruiting function if we didn't have trust. And if you're not familiar, if you're like, hey, how do I do that? Right. I am super impressed by how far I've come since the beginning. But there are some books, like I've read hundreds of books at this point on psychology and recruiting, written by people that are working in the space or psychologists. And I definitely would say start there. There is this book that is escaping my mind right now, but maybe what I'll do is after this, I'll have a follow-up with it. Let me just write this quick note so I can try to remember what the book is called. Actually, communication. I highly recommend reading the book Nonviolent Communication. I think that that's a really, really good one for recruiters. It gives you just like a friendly reminder and a framework of understanding where people are coming from, because you're working with people, you're dealing with people, hiring managers, people on the teams, and you're juggling a bunch of different needs and competitive or competing priorities at all times. And I think that this is a really, really good book for people who want to be in recruiting, because in recruiting, you're going to have to repeat yourself a lot. And I think that this is a really interesting book that I think anyone working at any company should read. Like it should be like an onboarding book. Everyone's required to read it type thing, but I digress. Let's continue. I met all the hiring partners and the teams I'd helped build. Again, how am I supposed to find the right people if I don't even know the people? I took my first interviews and I made my first sales hires. So I did make a sales hire relatively quickly. And taking your first interview, sometimes a company will have you not do that for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever their training process looks like. I believe in getting on calls pretty much day one, day two. The sooner you do it, the sooner you develop the skills. Obviously, there's essential training that must still be given, but to get into phone screens, it does not take a lot. And I'll be doing a different training on that sometime next week. I'll most likely be posting it on my LinkedIn newsletter. So if you don't follow it, it's free. It's called Recruiting School, but I am going to be sharing my framework for having these intro calls, because intro calls for recruiters, a lot of it is like clockwork. Obviously, a lot of it still needs to be personalized, but there's a lot of heavy lifting that I feel like people are doing time and time again. And it's just like, use this framework and that'll just make sure that you're getting what you need done quicker. And then the candidates also getting the information that they need to assess this opportunity. So let's get into the last thing I did in January, and then we're going to continue going through the list of things. So when I said their ATS was broken, this is what I actually ended up finding out. So my background was in marketing. And as a data-driven marketer, I was interested in understanding how many people are coming to the careers page, how many people are looking at our jobs, how many people are actually applying, and then why are we not hiring people? How do we have X amount of people applying each month but no hires, right? So through that, I was able to, one, identify this before I was able to then do this second thing I'm going to explain. So I realized that their ATS, their careers page was a little fucked up. I can't even get into it because I need to be mindful of time. But their careers page was all sorts of fucked up. Let's just say that. And their ATS was not integrated correctly. I believe their API had expired and a new one wasn't put wherever it needed to be, which meant if you were applying to work at this company, no one fucking knew because your application was not getting to the place it needed to be. So if you are watching this, whether you are new or not, let's write this one down. We need to test. We need to regularly test our ATS system and make sure that candidates are actually getting through when they apply. So let's just all agree to that. And I still don't think that people take that seriously. People don't even take that as seriously in marketing. It's like these pages where you're collecting really important information, whether it's someone making a purchase or a candidate applying, the information needs to get into your system. So I was able to not only identify this, but I was able to go ahead and actually figure out when this happened and how it went as long as it did without being noticed. And what I noticed was where the drop off had happened in the applicants. I don't have like the chart in front of me, so I'm just going to say months. Say in April of that prior year. So it's the year before I start working with them, right? So slowly but surely these things take over and start to affect their hiring, right? And that's when they're like, okay, we got to get creative. Let's try something new. Let's get anyone's perspective. Let's get a fresh perspective. Let's get help, right? And what happened here was there was a drop in inbound applications, and then boom, it goes down to here. And we find that a GitHub ticket was opened, like an engineer identified this issue. And then someone who probably shouldn't even have been given this kind of responsibility was closing tickets in GitHub or Jira or whatever, and closed it as if it was resolved when it was not. And it was definitely an employee that I know would have been satisfied knowing that this company was not attracting applicants or not getting inbound applicants, because then this candidate or this employee would be able to continue to coast and do whatever nonsense they should not have been doing. So I was able to identify that, and we were able to fix it, and we were able to just make sure that there were better checks in place so that things don't happen. Okay, so it's like that is a huge win. I had a huge win in like my first days, actually. That wasn't even just in my first month. That was like one of my first days working with them. And that definitely helped me build trust with this company to then be able to do the things that I'll continue talking about doing. So you can't just show up somewhere and just ask for shit and not provide value. So you have to be looking everywhere and figuring out how can I provide the most value if you're trying to, you know, just increase the amount of money that you're making in any aspect of your career, truly. So I was showing up, I was rolling up my sleeves, ready to do shit that no one wanted to do. And we continued to get into it. So taking another sip and we're going to continue. Boom. Okay, great. Just double checking. Cool. And boom. So let's get into it. So February and March, my income didn't change dramatically. I'm still developing the basics, the fundamentals. I'm rinse, repeat. I'm taking all of the calls. I didn't realize I didn't finish typing up the slide. I've read a ton of books. I've read a ton of blogs. I attended a bunch of webinars. Here's where you start. This is where I started. I'm actually going to just type this out because I'm going to forget. Sales calls. Whatever, I can fix that later. And then, okay. So I was reading a ton of books, blogs, attending webinars. Where you start is attend webinars for all of the tools that you have access to as a recruiter, so that you first start and get a foundational, like a super, go from foundational to a deep understanding of all the tools that you are using as a recruiter. It's not going to happen overnight, but you have to start by doing these things, right? So in my first month as a recruiter, deciding that I was going to be a practitioner, we're going to get into what this is next. So by deciding that I was going to become an expert, a practitioner in this stuff, I was able to develop these small habits that kept me up to date and got me up to speed very, very quickly on the different tools and systems and the things out there. So become an expert in the tools that you're already using. When there's a new feature in any of the tools that you're already using, think of new use cases and put it to work. If it's something that other people in the company could use, write that down, create a Loom video and share that with people. I was constantly doing this. I was developing an SOP, standard operating procedure, if you don't know what that means, which is just a way of doing things, right? So now the way of doing things, my system in my mind, I call the lean recruiter, and I am sharing that stuff with you guys over the next few months. But in the beginning, these were just documents that I started creating so that I understood what to do. And then when other people joined the team or were helping out, because again, small team, they could just go back to that piece of that book, that recruiting playbook, and just rinse, repeat. So you'd start there. Also, sales calls. You could do two things here. When people come inbound to the company and they're like trying to pitch you their product, just say yes to getting on a call with them. You don't have to pass the product on and qualify the product or whatever, but it could be interesting for you to understand what tools are out there, what competitors are out there. You can read their blogs. Sometimes their blogs will have educational stuff similar to the stuff that I share for recruiters, for other recruiters and people in this space as well. You can also just learn about other companies. You know, you will become a recruiter somewhere else one day as well. So it's a good way to start understanding the landscape. That's how I understood more HR technology. And I started to understand what the pain points were in the market. So let me write this down. Understanding pain points. And what I mean by that and why that's even relevant is by hearing the things that these companies time and time again were trying to, these problems that these companies were trying to solve. I started to understand, oh, if I could just solve that problem, I provide value. So I think that's a great way of understanding what's hot in the market right now, because that will always just be changing. Became an expert again in my existing tools that we were using. And then I did in February, that is when I started looking up HR certifications. So I wanted to understand what I needed to do to get one, because I started to see like SPHR and like just different acronyms after people's names. And again, earlier I mentioned I do not have a college degree and I did not study HR in school. So what that meant was for me, the earliest or the quickest certification I could study for and get would be called, I believe, an APHR. Anyone straight out of high school, you don't need work experience. I think you just need a high school diploma can take, and that just shows minimum HR proficiency, which is not recruiting, right? But it is adjacent, and I've always been interested in HR, which is why I had looked this stuff up. So I had found out that based on my situation, it would take 4 years. Was it 4 years? 3 years? I don't know at this point, because now I am currently qualified. So I think it was, I needed to work for, gosh, I can't remember the credentials, but I needed certain credentials because, and mine were much longer. I basically needed to work double time in the industry because I didn't have a degree. And then if you had an HR degree, I think you only needed 1 year of work experience. It was 2 years of work experience specifically in HR or recruiting. So I needed 4 years of working, 3 years, I believe, of working in the industry to test for this. Whatever it was, I applied. They know what my experience is, and they passed me. So that's all I know. But I have 4 of these, and I'm studying 4 of these for an exam I'm taking in February, and it's for my my SPHR. I believe is what my cert is called. So many acronyms, I'm exhausted. Don't worry, we will be able to get through the presentation. Not every page will be as long as this. Another sip, we'll continue to go. And then if you have questions, definitely let me know. I was not purposely making that rhyme. I guess I just do that all the time. Sorry, just cringe. All right, let's keep going. So now we're heading into March. So again, like I said, in that first quarter of working as a recruiter, my income didn't dramatically change, but I know some of you guys are probably thinking that is more than you're making now, and you'd be happy to even just get there. Let's keep going into this presentation and figure out how you can get a job and do this stuff too, or level up your existing skills if you are already working as a recruiter or an HR professional. So again, we had mentioned earlier that the ATS had broken, right? But there were also some employees on Glassdoor, talking about the truth. At one point, I do believe it did suck to work at that company, but I genuinely do see and believe that they had taken the feedback that they were receiving in the employee surveys and things of that nature, and they were actually implementing it. I saw it myself, and you would see it in the Glassdoor reviews. So we made it a point to start actively looking at our Glassdoor account and making sure that we were acknowledging anything, the good and bad. People also will review you as an interviewer as well there, whether or not they got the job. So we were starting to take that information in real time and implement it into just getting people the feedback, the training, the guidance that they needed, but also calling out the good when the good was shared as well, because as we would see, the Glassdoor reviews started to go up. The satisfaction in like the CEO satisfaction start to go up. And the truth is, it wasn't just keeping an eye on it and sharing the information and the feedback. There were strategies that we put in place to make sure we were collecting and getting more feedback into Glassdoor. And that's how we were able to do that. ATS optimization, I was able to not only fix that one thing, but also just look at our tool. What does this tool give us, right? I read all the blogs, webinars, all the things, and made sure we got the most out of it. And I started to identify gaps in the different toolings that exist out in the market, and where there just wasn't, something to fulfill our needs. I was just figuring out hacks. I was figuring out how to automate these redundant manual processes that we have to do every day. I was just really, really obsessed with that, and still am. I started hiring for new teams. So as mentioned, I started by hiring sales development representatives. And when I was doing that, because the company did not have a lot of inbound traction coming, at least from qualified candidates just yet, I was doing a lot of sourcing. So I don't know if I mentioned that in this list of things. So if not, I just want to make sure I call that out. I was doing a ton of sourcing, and I got really good at sourcing. And because I was successfully hiring salespeople, and those salespeople were doing well, I then was tapped to help hire for the enterprise sales team that they were now building from scratch. And then I went ahead and I helped them build that team from scratch. And those people did amazing. They got such positive reviews. They got promotions. They said such positive things about the organization. And again, that continued to build trust within the organization. I continued to read a ton on recruiting. I was definitely like, oh, what a bummer. Like some of these webinars and trainings that I would attend would count towards my continuing education for like getting my HR certification. But I was like, damn, like I have 3 years to wait until I can even start studying for this test. Like, yikes. So again, I don't think that people emphasize enough the importance of getting good at your craft. If you double down, you can do it. but if you're not really focusing on one thing, and sometimes you're just still exploring your career, and that's totally fine. And maybe this is opening your eyes to a certain segment of the industry or a different industry that you want to go deep on. But like I wasn't really loving marketing, and maybe that's why I didn't go super deep into an area, although my niche or whatever was like content marketing, and one could say I still use that stuff today. So there's that. So let's continue. Let me take another sip of water. Let me look at the time. Boom. I think we're doing good. I think we're gonna be able to get this done on the hour mark. All right. I skipped the where we need to call this out. So we do see that the money goes up a little bit. Let's see what happened here. So one thing to call out would be I did renew a contract. So I initially started as a contract recruiter. I had a 3-month contract. I obviously was doing good work. There was an opportunity for me to continue working with this company. So we signed another contract and my rate went up a little bit. And I continued to start automating and streamlining more sophisticated processes. I was on this mission to figure out how to make engineering scheduling easier. It sounds like rocket science, but I want you to know to this very day, no single ATS schedules. Like if your interview process it's 1 hour long and it's 2 different 30-minute meetings, and you're meeting with two different people. There's no product out there that seems to automate that. You can ask people when they're available, but you still have to like approve it. It sounds like we're trying to solve like, I don't know, like climate change or something, but we're really just trying to automate some basic scheduling. So if anyone has found something out there, definitely let me know. But what I was using here, we'll talk about in the next one, because we'll see another jump. So April, and then we go to May, boom. So in May, I start researching, in May, I start researching new tooling options to automate these thick processes. And in this case, I was using an ATS with a scheduling tool on top of it. I hope that at this point that ATS company has built this functionality in. I'm sure they're charging like an arm and a leg for it. I then did go ahead and make a software purchase that helped cut software spend and department spend as well as time to hire. So what that meant was I identified tools. I said, hey, these tools we don't use or we don't need, so stop spending on them. We're going to spend on this. And actually, this is going to save on your overall costs, because the person that has left the company that was spending a lot of time doing this doesn't have to do this all day anymore. Like we can hire another person, but maybe they could focus on something else. We were talking about that earlier, about when you start to understand what you actually need. Like when you streamline your processes and your systems and your tooling and stuff, you can really understand who you actually need to really just be running a lot of this stuff. And obviously doing the work still too, because work still needs to be done. So I automated that sophisticated scheduling. So I did find a way to automate that. It wasn't with one simple tool. It was two expensive, really, really fun to use tools. But we were able to get that done, and that was huge and super worth it. And then I also started hiring for engineering. So that's important to call out, because let's look at what happens in May. In May, my income starts to increase a bunch. And what's happening here is I update my contract, and for the engineering roles that I am going to recruit for, I'm getting commission for every person that I hire. And it's like a lump sum in like a few different, I don't even know how to explain it, but I'm just starting to get commission on the candidates that I hire. So we'll start to see my income continue to increase, because I start to not only hire more people, but hire more sophisticated types of roles. So let's go back to May, make sure I pulled that out. Boom. Okay, so what happens in June? So June, it goes down ever so slightly. That's fine. I don't have anything specific to call out there. But we rolled out these new tools out to the company. We started creating thicker standard operating procedures to train future recruiting coordinators, because we had decided we were going to hire recruiting coordinators. I believe We hired someone on site first, and then we hired a few people remotely. And I helped coordinate or train all of them. And then I was successfully hiring engineers, which is why we're going to see that in the following month, my income goes up because these people start, and then my commission starts to trickle. So let's go to July. Boom, that makes sense there. Oop. Rolled out software successfully, started onboarding recruiting coordinators, hired UX designers for finance and engineering leadership, which were all new areas that I had recruited for before. So that's also important to call out because I was understanding this stuff. I was picking it up. I was grasping this stuff. And I was and still am just so thirsty to become just the best I can at recruiting because I'm just very interested in it. I was always I don't know about you guys, but have you ever just like seen someone and you're like, how'd you get that job? You were really just like not qualified. And I had seen that way too much. And I was like, okay, if all these unqualified people can get these jobs, like what's going on? And also why do some companies suck to work at? I wanted to figure out like how to avoid that essentially. So I was and still am super interested in hiring and recruiting and all of the things. So July, good month, continued learning, continued earning, as they say. I'm going to take another sip. If anyone has questions, definitely let me know. And then I'm going to try to wrap this up. It looks like we are going to be good on time. Okay. Let's go into August. August, again, the money comes in at different phases. I don't know how to break down my, contracts and my payout systems in a brief way. So it's just not going to make sense. But to me, that makes sense. I'm continuing to recruit. I'm continuing to earn money, and I'm continuing to get different commissions for the roles that I'm hiring for, depending on what time they're, starting in their new role. In August, I hosted a career fair at a college. I continued to hire more people, more requisition. So I was hiring not only the expectations of the number of people that I was hiring were going up, but I was also hiring harder to fill roles. That's why we continue to see my income go up towards the end of the year. I continue to partner with People Ops. I was also invited to weekly meetings with the founders now. So, I don't want to like pretend like I showed up and I'm like, all right, CEOs, like, what are we doing here? No, like I was very slowly, but surely, actually quickly, but surely, quickly, but surely, learning this stuff, but it was step by step. And that was like all I was doing. I really committed a year to really going all in on this. I see the question came in, so I'm going to address it in a second. I really went all in on this for just a year, and those fundamentals were very, very helpful for me to build on top of. So I just want to call that out. That year, I'm not sure I don't think I did a single open mic. No, I did. I'd say the first half of the year, I did not. No, I'm lying. I went back to doing comedy 3 months into this, scrap all of that. Let me just address this, but I did put a lot of work into my recruiting, not just during the hours I was getting paid to do it, is what I want to call out there. Love sourcing, always looking for best tools. Are you using LinkedIn Recruiter? If not, what is your preferred method of sourcing? Terry, I'm obsessed with sourcing. Like literally, I am so obsessed with sourcing. So I do a blend of things. So I definitely use LinkedIn Recruiter. I definitely use Phantom Buster. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But that's another thing that I want to write about next week. So when I was at my last company, I'll tell you what Phantom Buster is in a second if you're not familiar. I'll click that. I answered live. Boom. And then answer live. Boom. Okay, cool. So what I like to do is I use Phantom Buster. So when I started my last job, my co-founder had wanted our engineering intern to create some internal tools for us. And I was like, say no more. I already do that. I use this tool. And Phantom Buster is quite interesting because it automates your ability to not reach out to candidates. I mean, I'm sure it does, but that's not what we're using it. I mean, that's not what I use it for. But it's a really interesting way to automate different information and different things from different websites and other areas that are not LinkedIn to help you find other people that may not have their LinkedIn profiles up to date. So I would say that that is probably my favorite sourcing tool. Everyone should be using LinkedIn Recruiter and some kind of ATS regardless. But I think that if I could only use one other tool, it would be Phantom Buster. There's some really, really wild things you could do there, so I highly recommend it. Let's see, August, and then we're almost at the end, so I am going to go ahead and just run you through these last few months. And again, if there are any other questions, definitely let me know. And I would also be curious about what your favorite sourcing tools are as well. And yeah, I plan on doing like a whole training on sourcing because it's literally my like obsession. So let's go to September. In September, I have hit an $11,000 month, and then we roll into consistent 15s, which is just still crazy thinking about it. But boom, in September, I really, really, really dialed in my process. And this is actually around sourcing. So I really, really started to understand what was working for me for finding the types of people I was looking for the types of roles I was looking for at that time. The economy always changes. The way you recruit, where you recruit, the messaging that you recruit for really always changes. And at this point, I had really realized that I was a really good sourcer. Like I was able to source people so effectively. I didn't have to send out hundreds of thousands of emails. I was able to personalize, and that's how I was able to successfully and quickly hire a DevOps engineer. And now a lot more of the roles that I've hired, I pretty much have specialized slowly and like just like doing these like slow personalized reaches and stuff like that. But this is when I really realized that if I just dial down this process, I'm able to figure out, okay, how do I apply this strategy to this role, to that company? So I really, really just focused on what was working and just figuring it out and just documenting it, because the less you have to think about what's next, the easier, and then the more consistent. And then as we'd go on, we'd hire more recruiting team members. So October, November, December, that's where we have the 15K months. Let's look at what happened there. I continued to just do what was working. I led company-wide trainings on interviewing and the tools that we were using. Again, I increased our overall efficiency in our tooling and our process and the team that we had, so we could just focus on higher level things. And then let me just make sure that that's not typos. Okay, cool. And then boom, December, engineering hiring continues to go well. We hire engineering managers, a product manager. We reduce the time to hire. Quality of candidate goes up. And when I say that, what I mean is the amount of people that are applying for the jobs that we're hiring for, that are actually qualified for the role, are going up. And then the average interviewer score was going up. And we rate people 1 to 4, so that number was going up, which meant we were finding more of the people that the hiring managers were interested in interviewing. What else was going on? We started to see, and we did see an increase in overall inbound applications. Those Glassdoor reviews continued to go up. Retention went up. People were getting promoted. The people I hired were getting promoted. So these were all things that allowed me to demand the amount of money that I did and still do demand as a recruiter. In my first year. So I look at it, I think it's amazing. I might even print this out and put it on my wall to remind me of why I do what I do as a recruiter, and why I'm so excited about my recruiting school and all the free information I've been sharing with you guys on recruiting, my experience, and things that you could just copy and paste into your process. Because recruiting is really, really important to me. It's really fun. And then if you're working as a recruiter, it's very fulfilling. Like to me, it's like, that's a lot of money. Like I could just make that for the rest of my life and just be fine, and I think that, it to me, as someone who doesn't have a college degree, who didn't have a family that was in the tech industry, like my dad's literally a mechanic, my mom's a teacher. I literally watched my mom get her master's degree and become a teacher. So I didn't really have anyone to guide me in my career. And that's why I'm also so passionate about helping others, whether you're new to recruiting or you're an existing recruiter, you're just trying to level up those skills, or just honestly getting these companies to get their shit together, because there's nothing worse than a shitty recruiting process. And there's a lot of what is it, rebuilding the wheel or whatever they say, rebuilding the bridge, restructuring the bridge. I realize I need to make an appointment after this, so I have to go. But I hope this prevents you from having to do that, or I hope this has been helpful or has opened your mind to becoming a recruiter. And whether you are interested in, transitioning into tech, working remote, becoming a recruiter, or leveling up those recruiter skills, or getting recruiting training for your company, definitely reach out. I'll send a follow-up email to everyone who registered to this with some notes. And then, if you are interested in applying to becoming a recruiting school student, definitely let me know by replying back to that email that I sent out. And then again, if you want to partner and get your teammates trained or get something like this created for your company, definitely let me know. I know how much of a task that can be. I'm currently still doing it for my clients. So I hope this has been helpful. I'll wait one more minute while I still have you guys for any other outstanding questions. And if not, I really appreciate you joining today. I will most likely be hosting another one of these sometime next week. So stay tuned. I'll give you guys a minute to drop anything into the chat. And if not, again, thanks for joining. And I hope you enjoy your weekend. Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right, it looks like we're probably good. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And for a second, I thought I didn't record. That was terrifying, but I hope you guys have a great day.